you.
Great. Welcome everyone to Enwayaang. We've been doing this every week in Gzowski College, so it's great to see some returning faces and some new faces. I'm going to start with a land acknowledgement and then explain our series very briefly. We respectfully acknowledge that we are on the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississauga Anishinaabe. We offer our gratitude to the First Peoples for their care for and teachings about our earth and our relations, and may we honor those teachings. And because we are in Zoom world, I always think it's good to think about where you are in your territory and have a think and maybe do a little research on your own location as well, if you're a settler as well. So thanks everyone for coming. Enwayaang means in Anishinaabe the way we speak together. We take that quite literally in Gzowski College, and we've had this Enwayaang series running since September so that we can speak together with different guests about their passions and interests and engagement. And so, as I said, it's been a great event, and it's great to see you all here. Thanks for coming. I'm going to turn this over to Stephanie, college assistant for Gzowski College, to introduce our guest.
Thanks, Mel. Hello, everybody. Today we have Kemi Akapo, a person of many identities and intersectionalities. She's a queer Yoruba woman, an immigrant, daughter, sister, partner, politician, the list goes on. Born in Nigeria and raised in West Africa, Kemi moved to Peterborough and Canada as a settler to pursue post-secondary education at Trent University. During her time at Trent, she was involved in the Trent International Program, chaired Trent International Student Association. She was the International Issues Commissioner for the TCSA, was an active member of the Trent African Caribbean Student Association, participated in every ISW orientation week, was a peer mentor, and worked at the Alumni Relations/International Office. She graduated from Trent in 2009 with a BA in English Lit and International Development Studies. She has since made Peterborough her home. She is a community advocate, volunteered with the YWCA Peterborough Haliburton, during which time she was part of the YWCA Canada contingent who went to the Commission of the Status of Women in 2016. She currently works at the New Canadian Centre as the Case Management Coordinator working with refugees. She is also a City Councillor for the City of Peterborough, representing Ward 3 Town Ward, the first Black woman to hold this position in Peterborough. Thank you for joining us today, Kemi. It's really great to have you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Hello and ekason. Ekason means good afternoon in Yoruba. And as I said, I am a Yoruba person, so greeting you the way that we would in my culture. Yeah, so as was stated, my name is Kemi Akapo, and I'm very honored and pleased to be here today. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the kind introduction and for welcoming us in such a good way. And to Melanie for recognizing the land that we're on. I also was going to encourage folks that, if they're not in Peterborough, to find out, about where they are. Are you part of a treaty? Are you on unceded land? And to learn about your role and the space that you take up and your duty to that. So thank you for that reminder, Melanie. And it's funny that I'm doing this talk at Gzowski because Gzowski is the only college that I was not affiliated with when I was at Trent. It's a very long story, but I happen to be affiliated with every other college, including Trail. However, Gzowski does have a very special place in my heart because of you, Melanie, actually. You always made me feel so welcome. And I still remember when I left Trent, which was actually 7 years ago yesterday, you gave me a Gzowski cup. And I have used that cup pretty much every day since it's at my desk at the New Canadian Centre, and I use it. I used it today when I was there. So I always remember Gzowski fondly, and I always appreciated the conferences that took place there, particularly the elders and traditional peoples gathering, and look forward to attending more in the future. So thank you to Gzowski. And I also, before I started, I also just wanted to recognize that today, for a lot of people, whether it's today, tomorrow, or over the weekend, marks 1 year since a lot of us really became aware of this global pandemic, and our lives changed, at least here in Canada, um, changed from the way that we knew it. Um, I feel like since 2016, we've always said, oh man, that was the worst year yet. There's no way the next year could top that. And then every year it's like, oh, actually I have more. And 2020 certainly brought with it a lot. So I just wanted to take this time to recognize that. It's been devastating globally, locally, and each of us have had to deal with this personally. No one has gone unscathed by it. Um, and we're not at the end yet, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. But I did want to take this time to honor how it has affected all of us, honor the people who have died as a result, uh, honor the folks who have loved ones who've died and weren't able to say goodbye, folks who just have had a terrible year, but also celebrate the folks who discovered parts of themselves that they probably wouldn't have had a chance to had they not sort of been forced to stay home. So I just wanted to recognize that. And some of the good that come out of it is this, right? Now we get to have these Zoom meetings and I get to talk to people and hear from other folks as well who I probably wouldn't have had a chance to interact with. So, with the challenges come some good. Okay, so my talk today is titled Afro, excuse me, it's titled Wakanda Forever, Afrofuturism as a Method of Healing and Source of Hope. But before I really get into that, I think there really needs to be some context as to how I got to this point. And really, the context is a large part of what I have to say. And really, Afrofuturism is sort of a means to an exploration that I'm just diving into. But yeah, so as was mentioned in the introduction, I was born in Nigeria, which is a country in West Africa, and I grew up all over West Africa. My family moved around a lot. I lived in Benin, I lived in Togo, lived in Burkina Faso, traveled to a lot more countries prior to coming to Canada. I came to Canada, came straight to Trent when I was 16. And at that time, I didn't really think much of it. I just was whatever. I'm 16. That's how old I am. I can't change that. Um, I knew I had a lot to learn, but I was fairly confident in who I was. I had a really, I would say fairly good upbringing, and was pretty sure of that. I knew the world. um, and then I started my classes. I started my education at Trent. I started going to classes, started having those conversations that you have, in the hallways when you're, if you lived in residence and you've got this common shared space. You start meeting friends from other disciplines and, get invited to dinner parties and potlucks. And you start having all these conversations. And it was through those conversations that my eyes really were opened and I saw my homeland in a way that I had never seen before. Um, it's I find it quite interesting that I needed such a large physical distance from it to really see it well, um, and really see how my upbringing there shaped my life, shaped my worldview, and the view of myself. So even though I grew up knowing that a lot of Africa was colonized by European countries or folks from European countries, I should say, and I knew about the trading of people who were enslaved, I didn't really fully grasp the magnitude of that until I came to Canada. Um, and part of that really was coming and learning about Indigenous people here in Canada. Prior to coming here, I'd met a couple Canadians and, I'd asked them about Canada and really all they mentioned was, poutine, Wayne Gretzky, hockey, the typical Canadian stereotypes. So when I came to Canada, that's exactly what I was expecting. I really didn't have much more to go on. I wasn't really good at doing my research before I came here. um, and my upbringing in the schools, the education that I had was very Eurocentric. I went to a number of international schools, really good schools, good education. However, most of the teachers were from the States or were from Europe, and the curriculum was American based. So, I could tell you all about Napoleon, I could tell you all about the Civil War, but if you at that time had asked me about the history of my own country, probably could not have told you a lot. Um, and even though I was surrounded by people who looked like me, I um, had this idea in my mind that the European way, the Western way of being, was the best way. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know the term for it at the time, but now I do, and it's called white supremacy, and just how really pervasive that was all around the world. Um, I remember, I think I was around 10 years old, was the first time I asked my mom to buy me skin lightening cream or bleaching cream. Thankfully, my mom was told me a very resolute no. But my wisdom, my 10-year-old wisdom, found some money, and I I snuck out and I bought a cream that I thought was skin lightening cream. And I used it for about 2 months until one of my brothers found it and very kindly informed me that it was a cream for yeast infections and not skin lightening cream. So that was the end of my foray into that. Quickly gave that up, thank goodness. But there were lots of experiences like that. I had a lot of challenges, just yeah, I don't necessarily want to go into too much detail, but examples like that where really um, this white supremacy really did rear its head in my life in a lot of ways that I was not aware of. Um, so yeah, coming to Canada and sort of learning the history of Canada, learning about the residential school system, learning about how folks from South Africa came here to study it so that they could go back to South Africa and implement it there was new to me and quite distressing actually. Um, but yeah, so my eyes were opened, and for the last 5 years or so, I really have done a deep dive to learn more. I mean, obviously, throughout my time at Trent and after that, I was still learning, but life happens and you get distracted. But over the last 5 years, it's really accelerated. About 5 years ago was when I first heard about Black Lives Matter and really started following, what they were talking about. I was a quiet follower. I didn't really talk about it to much people because I wasn't quite sure what it was all about. And um, I was there in Toronto during Pride when they stopped the march, and it was a huge controversy. And so I did some more reading. I had some conversations, and then of course we all know the stories from the States, right? We all know the names: Trayvon Martin, George Floyd, Sandra Bland, Breonna Taylor. Um, but do we know the names of the folks in Canada who have also died by the hands of the police and who have also died as a result of white supremacy? I would hazard a guess that most of us, myself included, don't know those names as well as we know the names of the folks in the States. So all that to say, all of this learning resulted in me um, getting angry, like uh, just like full on rage. Like, when you're so angry that your face is hot, your body is shaking, you can't think straight. So for a very long time, I was just angry all of the time. And the angrier I got, the more I thought of the stereotype of the angry Black woman. And I thought, well, of course I'm angry all the time. How could I not be? Um, it's funny, someone who I'm quite close to, was doing some reading recently and wrote to me and said, if I was a Black woman, I'd be furious all the time. And I said, yeah, I am furious all the time. But I choose not to focus on the anger, because that really can just eat you up, right? That really can, um, it's not sustainable and it's not healthy in the long run. So I choose to find joy where I can. And this summer was really a turning point for me. Well, I guess last summer, it's been so long now. Again, I felt that anger coming up because when George Floyd was murdered, you know, it seemed like a lot of people woke up to that for the first time, and you couldn't escape it. Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Clubhouse wasn't a thing yet, but even now on Clubhouse, just everywhere you went, everyone was talking about it. And, there was a part of me that was like, great, welcome to the conversation. But there was also a part of me that just was like, where the hell have you been? But at the same time, I had to remind myself that, at some point I too was not aware. So I can't really get angry at people for not being aware. So I'm glad people are coming to the table and are learning, but I'm still surprised by how many people are surprised by it. Um, Not to bring, I didn't really want to talk about them, but I think it's relevant. Nobody can escape the interview that Oprah did with Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. And the reaction to that I found quite interesting. People being shocked that there's racism exists in the monarchy. Um, and I saw this funny meme of all the countries that the UK colonized, writing an open letter saying, yeah, welcome. We've been here a while. um, so yeah, anyways, I sat with my anger for a while because I really didn't want to just be angry. I wanted to use that as a tool for something, but I didn't know what. And when I sat with my anger, I really realized that it was primarily rooted in sadness and in grief. Sadness for the futures that were never to be. I'm sad for all the people who um, were not able to experience this gift of life to its fullest extent. Sad for the people whose lives were cut short, or who were told that they couldn't, or who were, just simply by existing, were seen to be a danger, or were told they weren't good enough, or had to live with a system of oppression that still exists till today. Um, Sad for myself. Sad that I grew up thinking that I needed cream to make my skin lighter. And I'm sad for all the people who are to come, who will still face that oppression, still have those feelings. And just grief, just mourning the loss of people, and mourning that sense of not feeling good enough. Yeah, so this, when I finally realized that this grief was really what I was feeling, I started to feel, well, how can I channel this grief into good? Or how can I sort of turn it around to see what I can do with it? And that's where Afrofuturism comes in. So I'm just gonna share my screen really quickly. I've put together a presentation. Let me know if you can see it. Somebody do a thumbs up, or okay, great. Thanks,
Yeah,
Stephanie. Now I just got to make it full screen. Here we go. All right. Yeah, so as I said, Wakanda Forever, Afrofuturism as a method of healing and source of hope. So for folks who are not familiar with the term Afrofuturism, it's a concept that really has existed for centuries. And the term Afrofuturism was coined by a person named Mark Derry, either in 93 or 96. I found conflicting information when I was doing research, but in the 90s. So it's relatively new, but not super new. And the definition of it has evolved over time. So Afrofuturism, some definitions that I found, is an intersection of imagination, technology, and the future. Sorry, intersection of imagination, technology, the future, and liberation. by Yatasha El Womack, who is a Nigerian woman. Afrofuturism is an art form, practice, and methodology that allows Black people to see themselves in the future despite a disturbing past and present. I could not find the source of that in time for this presentation, but I'm determined to find out who said that. And another person by the name of Ingrid Lafleur defines it as a way of imagining possible futures through a Black cultural lens. So it really depends on who you talk to. Some people will say it's, it's science fiction. For me, it's one of those terms that really you can make it your own. Really what it comes down to, at least for me, is a reimagining of a future and a reimagining of the past as well as a source of healing. Because when I think about the past, really all I can do is get angry. So I try to use it as a means of trying to reimagine what the past could have looked like. And if I find that oddly comforting. So whether you call it escapism, I don't know, or wanting to escape reality, perhaps that is that for me. But also for me, the future part is really key. What can we use our imaginations for to imagine a future, specifically for folks who are Black or a descendant of Black people, so African Americans, if you will. This term really came to sort of larger knowledge as a result of the movie Black Panther, which if you haven't seen, I would highly encourage you to. It's if you're into superhero movies, it'll be a fun one. If you're not, it's still interesting. It may not be your thing, but it's still an interesting movie. So it came out in 2018, and really that's when I started seeing a lot more people talk about Afrofuturism as a concept, as an idea. And in it, so I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but there is a region called Wakanda, and in which people live. And Wakanda is built over this huge deposit of a mineral called vibranium. Uh, Sadly, vibranium does not exist in real life. I looked it up because I'd like to get my hands on some, but not obtainable. Similar to unobtainium, does not exist. But the folks who live in Wakanda use vibranium as a tool, as a means for the betterment of their community. They use it for construction, they use it for healthcare, they use it for education, they use it in order to basically lift everyone there so that everyone there lives a good life. This person in the top over here in the white dress, her name is Shuri. She, I guess, for lack of a better word, is a princess. And she is the lead scientist in Wakanda. And she develops, you name it, she develops it. These folks here, this person here, Chadwick Boseman, rest in peace, is the Black Panther for this movie. And he is surrounded by these people called Dora Milaje, and they are essentially the King's Guard. And it's a group of these really badass women who are highly skilled, highly trained. And trust me, you do not want to get between them and Black Panther. As you can see here, there's the Black Panther sculpture, and there's the Black Panther standing on top of it. And here you can see, sort of the built space. So you've got the sort of the urban with the, non-urban, I would say, the built green space. So Black Panther is, I think, for a lot of people, the first time that they've come across this term of Afrofuturism. However, comic books, which I grew up reading and love reading, have had this idea in them for decades. If you read particularly some of the more obscure ones, there are lots of comics that depict Black, whether they're superhero or just everyday people like you and me, who live in a world or who envision a world that is different, and a world that might seem unobtainable, but they choose to live with that future in their mind, in order to basically picture a better life for themselves and for the people around them. And so that's, comic books have always been really good, I think, at speaking for those who always feel like they're in the margins. I mean, certainly there's the ones who speak to the larger population, but if you really do look at a deep dive on comic books, you'll notice that a lot of the folks that they speak to um, are folks who are marginalized. Uh, it, Queer people, especially, there's a lot of queer representation in comic books. And it's interesting now to see in newer comics sort of the meld between, the Black culture and queer culture, and seeing how that's coming out in comics. And I'm curious to see how future, blockbuster movies will show that. Um, Another sort of pop culture reference that folks might know was Janelle Monae. So Janelle sort of exploded, a couple years ago when she came out with her first album, Archandroid. And as you can see from the photo, it really is sort of this like futuristic tech sort of vision. If you, what's the name of that show? Black Mirror. If you watch Black Mirror, there's one episode of Black Mirror, and I should have looked it up. But essentially, it's these folks who are dying, and they sort of get plugged into this alternate reality. And this album, Arc Android, reminds me of that episode, because it's essentially these two women who in real life probably would not have met, but in this future that they've imagined for themselves, live this beautiful life together. Janelle came out with another album named Dirty Computer, and it's one of my favorite albums. I absolutely love it. And she's got a song in there called Crazy Classic Life on Dirty Computer. And I've got the lyrics up here, and I'm just going to read them really quickly. You told us we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, amongst those life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Young, black, wild, and free, naked on a limousine, riding through the hood real slow. I love it when I smell the trees. I just want to party hard, sex in the swimming pool. I don't need a lot of cash. I just want to break the rules. I don't need another ruler. All of my friends are kings. I am not America's nightmare. I am just the American dream. Just let me live my life. I want a crazy classic life. I want a crazy classic life. Should the world end tonight, I had a crazy classic life. And to me, and here's some photos from the video, which I screenshot from YouTube. Thanks, YouTube. And these lyrics, to me, really sort of encapture some of what Afrofuturism is for folks. It's not necessarily this, sci-fi world where, they want to, have all this tech and AI available to them. They just want to live crazy classic lives. They just want to do what a lot of folks take for granted, have sex in a swimming pool. They just want to be able to break the rules without fearing for their lives. They don't want to be seen as nightmares. They just want to live what they would deem, or what she calls, a crazy classic life. And when I was doing research for this talk, I watched a lot of videos, and the thing that struck me is how common that is, particularly with young Black boys, where the future, when they were asked, like, if you could have anything that you wanted, what could it be? And heartbreakingly, a lot of them said, I just want to like go outside and play with my friends without being seen as a threat. I just want to walk around in a hoodie and not be afraid to get shot. I just want to have the same freedoms as everybody else does. So Janelle really, I believe, encaptures that in this song and in this whole album as well. Afrofuturism also, bleeds into art as well. As I said, it really can be anything that you want it to be. So there's this artist that I follow on Instagram. His name is Kemi Akapo, I believe. And I messaged him on Instagram and he responded, and I was like, oh my God, because he's got like thousands of followers. So got his permission to share these photos, but please check him out on Instagram. And when I was talking to him, he didn't originally think about his artwork as Afrofuturism, but he can understand why people would think that when they see these images. Because quite frankly, you don't really see Black people in art depicted this way. Um, um, I particularly like this photo here, and bonus points to folks if they know who this is. If you don't know, that's D-Ray. He's known for wearing that blue, I don't even know what that's called, everywhere. He's been wearing it for years. It's actually a bit ridiculous. Anyways, but I really like this photo or this piece of art in particular because it's got the juxtaposition of the bright colors, the flowers, and you don't often get to see particularly Black men depicted in this way, right? Where they're just standing there in beauty, in light, in color, not as a threat. Of course, you would recognize this as George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Michaela Cole, and I unfortunately don't know the names of these other folks. But in the conversation that I had with him, he does his art particularly because he wants folks to reimagine themselves, but he also wants non-Black folks to also see Black people in a different light. And he also just kind of wants us to remove the shackles of how we have imagined ourselves. There's another artist also on Instagram, Aphrodise, and did not respond to my Facebook or to my Instagram message, but that's okay. But also their art, and really their page is a collection of art from other sources, but very similar, where depicting imagery that is not common, in depicting putting people in situations that you probably haven't, maybe not haven't imagined, but aren't used to seeing. I particularly like this one on the bottom right, with the snow and the clothing and the mask. I believe this is a Senegalese woman, and sort of the juxtaposition of, when people think of African people, they think Africa, right? They don't necessarily think that we belong anywhere else beyond that. So I like that juxtaposition. And really, it's beautiful. It's just beautiful art to look at, to see. So yeah, it takes me to this idea of the new normal. And I'm just going to stop sharing my screen now. We talk a lot about COVID and how it's been awful, and it certainly has been. And there's a lot of talk about the new normal. And when I think about that, I always wonder what people think about when they say that. Because the old normal was not working, or rather, it was working for a certain few. Jeff Bezos, who seems to be doing even better than he was before, which is very unfortunate. But when I envision a new normal, I don't envision going back to how we were, or at least I hope that we don't go back to how we are. And my hope is for a future that is almost beyond our imagination. I know it sounds a little bit naive to think that way, but I feel that this concept of Afrofuturism really helps me envision a future that may not be possible in my lifetime, but if I really stick to that, some of the work that I can do in my lifetime can help inch us forward to that. And I think particularly for the young Black kids growing up today, growing up imagining, not even imagining, but just believing that that kind of future is attainable, I think is going to be a huge mind shift. And I just hope for them that they are not, I mean, I know it's unlikely, but my hope for them is that young Black kids in particular don't have to overcome so much to just get to a point where they feel like they can imagine a nice future. I just want them growing up believing that that's possible. But doing so in a way that, and I neglected to mention this at the start, but doing so in a way that is inclusive um, of everyone, and doing so in a way that uh, it does not leave anybody in the margins. Um, so yeah, that is my hope. And I have to say, in the last year or so, since I really started doing research into this, I have found it to be quite therapeutic. When I get really angry, I sort of go to my happy face and just imagine this beautiful future. And I hope the same for others. And to me, it's also a sense of hope. And I think as long as we have hope, we'll be okay. Um, yeah, so those are sort of my musings. And happy to take questions, or if folks have any comments that they want to add as well, I welcome that. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kemi. That's yeah, you gave us a lot to chew on there. And I think when I was just thinking a minute ago, you said hope, and I like that a lot better than when you said, I hope I'm not being naive, because I don't know that dreaming for something better is naive. I think it's hopeful. Like, that is, to me, hope doesn't have to be naive, but it's interesting. I was just thinking about your contrast there from naive to like a hope for the future. So yeah, I have to think about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and when I say naive, I mean that was a poor choice of word. Just more, I'm a realist, right? Like as hopeful as I am, I'm also a realist. You can't live in this world and just be completely naive. Um, but I have conversations with some of my friends, particularly my Black friends, about this future I imagine. And for a lot of them, they're not there yet, and I totally get that. And they tell me, Kemi, you've got your head in the sky. You really need to come back down to earth and face the reality. And I tell them, I face that reality every day. As a woman in Peterborough, uh, very aware of that every day. As a woman in politics, very aware of that every day. So I do think I'm quite rooted in reality. So sometimes when I do think about this future, I do wonder, not is it a waste of time, but sometimes I do find myself pausing. So that's what I meant. But eventually, I always come back to like, no, I think this is a worthwhile endeavor.
Yeah, amazing. Does anyone want to, you can wave your hand, ask a question, and we'll turn to you. And you can also send something into the chat, and Kat and I can read the chat.
I just want to add to that, just what you just said there, Kemi, is I, for some reason, just saw a very old interview with Margaret Thatcher before she was Prime Minister. And she was talking with kindergarten children, and they asked her, do you think there will ever be a female prime minister? Would you like that? And she said, I don't know that there'll ever be one in my lifetime. And it was just before she got into it. So I'm hopeful too. So
that's a good point. I mean, we can discuss how good Margaret Thatcher was in a different conversation.
Yeah.
However, that is one thing I did mean to say is that 50 years ago, this would not have happened. I would not have been invited to come in and give this talk. 50 years ago, there's no way I would have been elected to city council in Peterborough. So whenever I sort of, get down, I do think about how far we have come, how much progress has been made, and definitely that does keep me going. And there might be things that I may not think possible in my lifetime that we do see happen. Another close friend of mine was, we were talking recently about the queer movement, particularly in the States, and I can't remember if she was reading an article or she was speaking to someone who basically said that they were shocked by how much progress was made in their lifetime. That back then, when they were younger, they never would have imagined that it would be possible for queer folks to, be out in a relatively safe way. Of course, that's not true of all queer folks, particularly trans folks. But yeah, they were saying that, um, yeah, that they did not imagine that for them in their lifetime, but they were so glad to be able to see that. So I also have hope that it's possible that things that, you know, that even maybe now I might think is impossible will be possible, 20, 30 years down the line.
Yeah, that's more what I meant. Not that Margaret Thatcher is any kind of.
No, I know.
But yeah, just adding hope to the hope train, really, of yes, what can happen.
I'd like to add to the hope train also, because I'm 74, and when I was watching these demonstrations this summer, to see all of the non-Black people in the demonstrations, all of the white people and the Chinese people, and I mean the diversity in those demonstrations compared to, let's say, 50 years ago. And I've seen this. It gave me so much hope. It really did. Um, I still believe it will never be perfect, because I think there's always going to be people who want to be with people who look exactly like they do, or who pray exactly like they do.
Mm.
But it's so much better than it was when I was 20.
Mm.
That please don't give up hope. It's getting better.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you for sharing that.
Does anyone else want to ask a question? Oh, Mary Geese asked. Thank you for your community work. What, can you see that? I'm wondering,
Yes,
Mary
yes.
said, I'm wondering what your vision is for Afrofuturism when it comes to Indigenous from Turtle Island and African Black solidarity, and what that relationship would look like.
Thank you for asking this question. There's a quote by Malcolm X, and I'm gonna mess it up, but essentially he said, the most disrespected person in America is the Black woman. And when I first heard that, I was like, ooh, tough words, Malcolm. But then the older I got, I was like, oh yeah, Malcolm was right. But I would add Indigenous women to that as well. And I firmly believe that um, the solidarity, or rather, there is a lot um, of solidarity that can be found between Indigenous from Turtle Island folks and Black solidarity. I think, I think when you think about forms of oppression, there's different forms of oppression, but really they're quite similar across the board. And a lot of what Indigenous people are fighting for are very similar to what Black people are fighting for. And if you are, particularly if you are a Black person who, was born and raised in a country that was colonized, I think you feel that connection even more. The connection of growing up in your own country and not being able to speak your mother tongue, even though you live there, even though you were born there, even if you're of there. Not, going to school and being taught a history that is false. I'll just say that straight up false. And a history that has been twisted and turned to make you look like the villain. So yeah, I think there's a lot of potential there. I would love to see more collaboration between, the you know, not just BLM, because they're not the only group out there, but I'd like to see more collaboration between Indigenous folks and Black people in their work in their work. A close friend of mine is also Indigenous, and it's funny because we send each other, like, things will happen and we'll send each other texts and we're like, yeah, they're at it again. And like, we just like know and understand each other, even though we grew up in very different backgrounds. Sometimes it's nice to just message her and just say like, man, this thing just happened to me, and she just gets it. And the reverse is the same. That being said, I do think that Black people, particularly people like me, settlers who are here, also have a responsibility to build and forge those relationships with Indigenous peoples and not put that onus on them. Because even though we may have similar experiences and face similar types of oppression, we are in their land. So I think that is our responsibility to reach out and make those connections and form real relationships and not just, the surface level ones, because really that's only when those deep conversations can happen and the collaboration really comes together. It's something that I thought about a lot, Marangiz, and I haven't quite come up with a great answer to that yet, but I definitely do think that there is a lot of space and a lot of opportunity there. And I think when we get together, it's like, watch out, world. Because don't try and come between Indigenous women and Black women, because you will not have a good time.
Ooh. Kemi, I'm going to turn to Cheryl because her hand is up, and then Faith.
Okay.
Thanks. Kemi, I was really moved by you saying that you channeled your grief into Afrocentrism. And thank you for introducing me to Afrocentrism.
Afrofuturism. Futurism.
Futurism, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, that's okay.
One of those isms. And I was wondering, one of and you just finished talking about relationships and collaboration and coming together. And I was thinking that the huge and profound challenges of climate change are calling for us to come together more and more. And what you might say of that Afrofuturism contributes to bringing us together.
Definitely, that's a good question. I think there's definitely, climate change is real. I mean, it's March, and I went outside in just a t-shirt. That shouldn't happen. And I know, every year we've got days in March that are warm, but as much as I enjoy the warm weather, at the back of my mind, I'm like, ooh, this is really bad. So there has been a lot written, actually, or at least from what I read, about Afrofuturism and how it intersects with climate change. And I think it sort of comes back to what I was talking about, solidarity between Indigenous people and Black African people, because around the world, climate change is impacting everyone, but the folks who are being the hardest hit are folks who, I would argue, are in Africa and Indigenous peoples around the world. They are the ones who are bearing the brunt of that. They often see it first. They're often the first ones to speak up against it, or ring the alarm. Of course, are not listened to. And then it suddenly hits North America and the Western world, and then all of a sudden, Bill Gates says climate change is real, and everybody is like, oh my God, Bill Gates has spoken, so therefore it must be true. Of course, there's still the deniers. But I would say that in the literature that I've read around Afrofuturism, there is definitely a recognition that climate change is real, and it affects people, particularly Black and Indigenous people. There hasn't, and really the focus has more been on solidarity and working together and coming together to find solutions, because it's not something that's only going to affect a certain group of people. And if we wait for those in charge to do things, you'll be waiting and it'll be too late. So there's a sense of, we're not waiting anymore, we're taking charge and we're doing what we can. So there's been a lot of cross sharing of information. And I watched this video of these Indigenous women in Peru, and they were actually on a Zoom conversation with Yoruba women in Nigeria. and they were talking about commonalities that they see, and climate change came up, and they were sharing tips of, well, this is how we address, land erosion, and it's like, oh, this is what we do here. We plant these specific types of trees, that kind of thing. But bringing it back to Afrofuturism, there's definitely, as I said, a recognition that it exists. And the focus really mostly has been on collaboration. And some folks do say that science and technology is the way out of it. I'm not so convinced. I think science and technology have a part to play, but I don't think they are the panacea that a lot of people seem to think that they are.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Thanks, Cheryl. Faith, go for it.
Thank you. I don't have a question. I just wanted to say thank you, Kemi. I've actually learned so much today. So many cool artists that I'm going to follow on Instagram. And we actually have similar experiences. And that's why I kind of fangirl and follow your journey as much as possible. So this is my
fangirl
first.
for you.
That's funny. So this is my first Enwayaang series talk that I've attended. I'm actually really pleasantly surprised, and I'm really glad Gzowski College is putting these on. I'm definitely going to be attending a lot more. And just wanted to end with that Afrofuturism, and everything I've learned from you today is just bringing up how if you can't see it, you can't be it. And that's definitely something I've been feeling a lot more as the more purposeful representation is becoming in like media and social media and like Western mainstream content that I follow. Like that's why Black Panther was such a huge hit. Like anytime something is done purposefully, like by us, for us, you see the impact that it has. And I'm plugging Lovecraft Country, which is this amazing show on HBO over the summer that's also very Afrofuturistic and had some amazing themes. So yeah, thanks, Kemi. It was nice seeing you.
Oh, thank you, Faye. Thank you so much for those kind words. Coming from you, that's like, wow, it's a big honor. So thank you. And yes, definitely plug Lovecraft Country as well. It's a great show. Lots of great shows. And I also have a list of books that I meant to share, but I ran out of time before I could get screenshots of them. So you'll just have to find me and I'll send you that list.
Yeah, find Kemi on Instagram or send them to us, Kemi, and we can send them around to people too.
Sounds good.
I have a really quick question that Faith was making me think about. A few weeks ago, I did an Instagram live with Taksu, and we were talking about, I think it was Taksu, and we were talking about, and it made me think of your point about pessimism and optimism and hope and despair. But the discussion was around a new Trent course that is being offered this year called The Glory of Africa. And the student said, and I know Faith knows this story too, but the student said to me, I wanted my continent to be represented with the glory side as well, and not only slavery, because the courses we were teaching at Trent often dealt with all of Africa as one, first of all, but secondly, covered the despair piece. And she was so articulate talking to me about it, because she said, you don't want to not know that history. That's important. Like you can't ignore the hard stuff. And I was thinking about this with Marenghi's comment too around Indigenous history. You need to know and I'm a historian, so this is where my brain goes. You need to know the hard stuff. But when she said to me, but I needed to know the other things about the continent as well. And just her face lit up when she said, so it's called The Glory of Africa. And I just was blown away. I was like, of course you need both of those, right? It's not really a question, but I was thinking as you were talking about, can you have both? That's, I guess, the question is, how do you wrestle with both histories?
Mm-hmm.
Person from the continent that doesn't get covered, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's great. And actually, I think, well, not I think, I know. That was a big focus for me this year, particularly for Black History Month. I really wanted the focus to be a celebration and a discovery, as opposed to, just talking about folks who were enslaved. Definitely key to know about that. Definitely key to learn about that history and Canada's part in that as well. And actually the continued history of oppression of Black people in Canada. But I really did want to focus on stories of celebration, stories of joy, stories of hope, because those two are key. No life is lived one or the other. Um, I find that even folks who have really tragic live really tragic lives still have moments of hope and joy. Um, so um, you need a mix of both, and you can't just focus on one or the other. You got to be realistic, and that's who I am. And I look at my life, and I've definitely had a lot of challenges in my life, but I've also had some really great moments in my life, and I think for the most part, not I think, I know for the most part that I'm quite privileged, and live a life that only so many people could only dream of having. Um, Definitely, um, sometimes it can be hard to find the balance, um, particularly when you live in a space that only wants to remind you of one aspect of yourself or one aspect of the worldview. Um, or you are constantly, having to fight what I would call like the little fights, just a recognition that, Africa, continent, not a country. And to me, like, that's just the basics, right? Like, that's not even delving into the real topics. Um, so it can be challenging not to fall into despair when you are constantly reminded and constantly aware that you are the other. You were seen as a threat. You were seen as taking up space you shouldn't. And that's why folks, Black folks create spaces for themselves, right? Because and in those spaces, they feel like they can breathe. And for me, um, Instagram has really helped me with that, and TikTok now, actually. I find those spaces of Black joy, and it's just so awesome, Black celebration. There's another artist, again, I wanted to show her, but she's also on Instagram, and her handle, if I can find it. Oh, I lost it. But she roller skates, and I roller skate too. And just like the videos that she puts out of just like skating, she's somewhere in the States, and just full of these bright colors. She's just happy, and she's with her Black friends doing that. Um, and so those spaces are key, and those spaces are sacred. And I've got a couple of chat groups where we just sometimes all we communicate it through is memes. We just send each other memes. But thank you, Sierra. Thank you for joining. Have a great day. Um, but yeah, those spaces are key, and having that community is key as well to not just focus on the despair, but to focus on the joy, but to also share in despair as well.
I hear that, and I'm not minimizing despair. I just thought it was such an interesting idea that the other problem I think we have as white history students in Canada is we only hear I'm talking about history, not the but like we only hear, and that was her point around
Yeah,
yeah, slavery is not all that the continent brought, is.
Yeah, and the media is to play has a part to play in that. You look at a lot of the movies that 12 Years a Slave, what's that? Django Unchained, or like all these big blockbuster movies. All they focus on is slavery, and again, definitely important. But if that's the only story you're told, that's the only story you're aware of. That's what you start to believe in, and you can't imagine other possibilities. And then you meet someone like me, and then, if you're me or someone like Faith, then you have to have these, very awkward conversations with people, very well meaning, but they say things and you're like, okay, well, do I just, smile, or do I take this as a learning opportunity or educational opportunity to teach somebody?
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Kemi. I will wrap us up unless anyone else wants to ask one more question before we finish off. Yes, the elders gathering is next week. Marangees is off, but she just reminded us of that. And yes, we do support and attend the elders gathering. Many of us on this call, and many of us in Enwayaang and in Gzowski College and in the community. So that's great. Kemi, really empowering, beautiful, thoughtful piece. It was so great to hear just to hear your personal interest in Afrofuturism and what it has meant. It was just beautiful. And yeah, thank you for that. I don't have more. It was great. It was really great to see you. I've known you for, I guess, a longer time than I realized. When you said when you graduated, I was like, oh my gosh.
I know, right?
Crazy. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I see you all the time, but in Peterborough, but I don't always get to see you featured in a talk. So I really want to thank you for joining us today. And thanks to our audience as well. We will send, we can send book recommendations, Instagram, film, all that good stuff out to people if they want it. That you can always email us at gzowski@trentu.ca if you don't want us to just bombard your email account, and we can send you whatever Kemi passes on to us. And lastly, Kat, I just wanted you to tell people what's coming up for the next couple of weeks in Enwayaang, and then we'll close off.
Sounds good. Hello, everybody. My name is Kat Gatley. I am a Gzowski College ambassador here. So thankfully, every week we have new speakers coming and joining us in Enwayaang. Enwayaang's usually been a few hours, one time a year, annual event in which we have Trent professors. But luckily, somehow during this pandemic, this has been an incredible adjustment for us, and we've been having this opportunity to provide a platform for many inspirational speakers to come and talk. And so next week, we're going to have another inspirational speaker come and join us. And that's going to be Shannon Roach. And she's going to be talking about the importance of women standing up for themselves and women empowerment and everything in that little realm of how women can stand up for themselves in business and make those changes, and how we acknowledge that there is this like realm of discussion in which that we can start to defy these stereotypes. We can start creating a better and more welcome environment for everybody. And so we're going to talk about that quite in depth next week with a feminism focus. That's what we have up next week.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Thanks again, Kemi. It was delightful to have you with us, and I feel like you are Gzowski somehow. You can't possibly have been in all the colleges and not Gzowski. That's horrifying to me, but we'll have to rectify that somehow. Honorary later membership.
Awesome. I love it.
Great.
Thanks so much,
Right.
Kemi.
Okay. Thank
so
you
much.
all.
That was an amazing talk.
Thank you. All right. Take care, folks. Stay safe and drink lots of water.
That's what we're doing right now.
Bye.
Bye, Kemi. Thank you.